Good afternoon.
Welcome. This is the fireside chat, normally with Debbie Marks, but Debbie is out of town today, so I am Kathy Benner, and I'm hosting the fireside chat. And we have with us today Angie Hill. Angie, tell us a little bit about yourself before you give us your presentation. We'd love to hear your story and how you actually became a financial planner.
All right, well, great. Well, thank you, Kathy. Yeah, I have actually been a lifelong resident of Central Ohio for 45 years now. I've been on board with Edward Jones as a financial advisor for about a year and a half. And prior to that time frame, I actually was a small-time investor with them for 14 years. Forever grateful for the difference that they've made in my life. And so it really, it's kind of a way to pay it forward. I really appreciate the time that my financial planner worked with me, and so it's time to help other people and pay it forward.
Perfect, perfect. Well, I'm going to just let you go ahead with your presentation, and you can take it from here.
Okay, thank you. Well, as I had mentioned, my name is Angie Hill, and I'm the Edward Jones financial advisor here in Central Ohio. I became a financial advisor because I have a passion for investing and helping people meet their financial goals. And this is one big reason why I came here to present, is to help people like you become educated investors. And since one of the biggest goals a person can have is a comfortable retirement, this topic is an incredibly important one. Our seminar today is designed to help you become a more educated investor and to assist you in your path towards reaching your unique goals. As unique as your goal will be, the path to that goal, in our view, remains the same. When your goals are determined, evaluate whether they're realistic based upon the time horizons and on the investments you're comfortable with. A trusted financial advisor can help you decide what tools and strategies can help you reach your goal. The more you know about the tools and strategies available to you, the more you'll understand about where your money is going and what it's doing for you. You'll stay on track by annually evaluating where you are and whether you've reached your goals and what new goals you'd like to achieve. Is your current strategy working for you, or are there adjustments that need to be made? The path I've mapped out on this slide is only one strategy to help you reach your long-term financial goals. This seminar, as with all of our seminars, helps provide information on the tools and strategies that are available to assist you in meeting your needs. Whether you're here because of a recent change in your employment or you're just trying to become a more educated investor, this discussion will help you understand your options for your employer retirement plan when this type of change happens. No matter where you are in your career or what your current situation may be, it's always great to know that your options, so you can make the right decision, not only for yourself, but for your family too. Whether you've changed employers, been laid off, or been laid off before you plan to retire, we're offered an early out package that could make it possible, or at least tempting, for you to retire now, or you're simply approaching retirement age. I want you to know it's totally normal to feel unsure and uncertain when the time comes to actually do something with the assets in your employer retirement plan. After all, you may have spent a significant number of years working to get it to where it's at today. That's why gaining knowledge and a good understanding of your options is a great place to start. Today we'll discuss the options for an employer retirement plan and how each one might impact your retirement. Each one has potential benefits and trade-offs, so it's important to weigh each option carefully. First, you may be able to leave your plan assets right there where they are. Second, you may be able to move your plan assets to another employer's plan if you're changing employers. And third, you may want to move or roll your assets to an individual retirement account or an IRA. Or fourth, you can receive a lump sum distribution. And finally, although they're not as common these days, we'll talk a bit about pensions if there are people here who will be drawing for one monthly. Once you have a basic understanding of your options, I can meet with you one-on-one to help answer any questions that you may have so you can decide which option, or in some cases, options that make most sense for your individual situation, factoring in your current, future needs and goals. Let's talk generally about the potential benefits and trade-offs you'll need to consider as you make your choice before we discuss each option in general. Adjust my camera here. Investment options. What and how many choices do you have in your former or new employer's plan, or an account option such as an IRA? Advice and guidance. Will you have access to a financial advisor who can meet with you to discuss your retirement goals? For instance, this may include how much you can save each year, how you can invest your retirement assets, or how much you can withdraw in retirement based upon your situation. Fees and expenses are another consideration. Each of the options just mentioned will involve different fees and expenses, and it's important to consider the potential account fees, investment-related expenses, and other administration fees that you may pay, and the impact they could have on your long-term goals. Next, taxes and penalties. In general, a 10% early withdrawal penalty and income taxes apply if you take your money prior to age 59 and a half, unless certain conditions, unless certain conditions are met, and we'll talk about this a little bit more in depth. Withdrawal options and required minimum distributions is yet another important consideration. The key consideration here will be around how much access you'll have to your assets and when the required minimum distributions are required. And last consideration, for example, do you have large holdings of employer stock? Are your retirement assets protected from creditors? I can help you work through the potential benefits and trade-offs considering what's most important to you. And with that in mind, let's take a closer look at each of the options. Let's take a look and difference in growth potential for a taxable versus tax-deferred investment over time. As you can see, the longer you keep those funds invested tax-deferred, the greater the potential your retirement savings can grow. All three of the other options, leaving it, moving it, and rolling it, will allow you to continue to grow your retirement needs or your retirement assets tax deferred. Let's start with the first option. Leave your asset in your employer's plan. This is an option if your former employer's plan allows you to leave the assets in the plan when you retire or change employers. Not all plans do, so you need to check with your plan administrator to determine if this is an option available for you. If this is an option, leaving your assets in your former employer's plan will avoid potential taxes and penalties until you take a distribution. Now, depending upon the type of plan, your savings may continue to grow, tax deferred or even tax-free, and the longer you keep those assets invested tax deferred, the greater the potential your retirement savings has to grow. In addition to the ability to defer taxes, leaving your assets with your former employer's plan may result in lower fees and expenses relative to an IRA. Now, it's also important to note if you leave your employer in the calendar year you turn 55 or later, typically you can take the money from your former employer's plan and avoid the 10% early withdrawal penalty that normally applies to withdrawals taken prior to age 59 and a half. If you need access to your retirement plan assets before you turn age 59 and a half, you may want to consider this option for at least a portion of your assets rather than rolling all of your assets into an IRA. Your employer will generally be required to withhold 20% of the distribution for federal income tax purposes, so you should take into consideration in determining how much of your assets to leave in your former employer's plan. Also, assets held in an employer plan offer a different level of creditor protection under the law than those held in the IRA, and your attorney or your tax professional can provide more insight for your particular situation. Now, keep in mind, although there are potential trade-offs to leaving your assets in your former employer's plan. For instance, if you choose to leave your assets in your former employer's plan, you generally have less control than you would in an IRA because many decisions, such as the individual investments, um, have less individual control than what you would have, such as the financial institution your account is with and what investments you have access to. The number and the type of investment options in an employer plan are also typically more limited to those available in an IRA. If you need help understanding your investments, your plan may offer educational materials, planning tools, telephone helplines, and workshops, but it may or may not provide access to a financial advisor who you can meet with to discuss your unique needs. Last, generally, you won't be able to contribute to your former employer's plan once you leave your employer, so any future retirement contributions will generally have to be made in a different account. The more accounts you have, the more difficult it may be to manage your assets and determine if you're staying on track to reach those goals. Your second option is to move it. If you're changing employers, and your new employer offers a retirement plan, you may be able to move your assets from your former employer's plan to your new employee's plan, provided your new employer's plan allows for this. You'll need to check with the plan administrator of your new employer's plan to determine if this is an option for you. Many of the benefits of moving your assets to your new employer's plan are the same benefits as leaving them at your former employer's plan. For example, you can avoid potential taxes and penalties when you move your retirement assets to your new retirement plan. Moving your assets to your new employer's plan can result in lower fees and expenses relative to that of an IRA. And if you leave your employer in the calendar year in which you turn 55 or later, you can take money from your new employer's plan and avoid the 10% early withdrawal penalty that normally applies to withdrawals taken prior to age 59 and a half. Assets held in employer plans may offer a different level of creditor protection under the law than those held in an IRA. Again, your attorney or your tax professional can provide more insight on this in your particular situation. There are a couple more additional benefits for this option. This option does add the potential benefit of consolidating your holdings in your former employer's plan with your new employer's plan. Now, having your retirement assets with a single firm may make it easier for you to manage your assets and determine if you're on track to meeting your retirement goals. And if you plan to work past the age at which you must begin taking a required minimum distribution, you generally do not have to take the RMD from your current employer's plan while you're still working. As with all of these options, there are potential trade-offs. So just as if you were to leave your plan with your former employer when you move assets to your new employer's plan. For example, you have less individual control relative to an IRA. The number and types of investment options in an employer plan are typically more limited compared to those available in an IRA. And you may have limited access or no access to a financial advisor who can meet with you to discuss your personal situation. Now let's discuss the options of rolling your assets into an IRA. And before we talk about the potential benefits and trade-offs of rolling into an IRA, let's first talk about how an IRA works. Like your employer plan, an IRA is a retirement account that allows you to save for retirement tax deferred. You can have an IRA in addition to your plan at work. And you may have heard of two different types of IRAs, traditional IRAs and Roth IRAs. And we'll talk about the differences here. So your traditional IRA is designed to grow tax deferred, and this means you do not have to pay taxes on your investments while they're inside of your account. Traditional IRA contributions may be tax deductible depending upon your income and whether or not you and your spouse participate in an employer retirement plan. However, you don't get out of paying taxes on your contributions and earnings completely. Instead, you pay income tax on your traditional IRA dollars when you take a distribution from the account. Although you can take an IRA distribution at any time, you'll have to pay a 10% penalty if you're under the age of 59 and a half when the distribution occurs, unless you qualify for an exception. There are several exceptions to the penalty, such as disability or using the funds for higher education expenses, but certain requirements must be met in order to qualify. If we meet separately to review your situation one-on-one, I can provide you with more information on these requirements. One other point to note, beginning at age 72 or age 70 and a half, if you were born before July 1st of 1949, you must begin taking a required minimum distribution every year. And if this applies to you, we can discuss this in greater detail. Different from the traditional IRA, a Roth IRA is designed to grow tax-free. The dollars you contribute are not tax deductible, but you also don't have to pay taxes on your investments while they're inside your account. And if you meet certain requirements, you won't pay any taxes on your distributions either. In fact, you can access your contributions at any time without penalty. There are also no required minimum distributions for an account or an individual account holder under a Roth. Clients who select the rollover option for their plan assets typically roll over to a traditional IRA. So this is the option we'll focus on today. And if you have further questions about traditional versus Roth IRAs, please see me after the presentation. One of the potential benefits is greater individual control. And as the name implies, an IRA is an individual account, which offers you greater control over your retirement assets than an employer plan. You also typically have a greater control over those assets in the investment choices, including individual stocks, bonds, annuities, as well as a broader selection of mutual funds. This can give you greater flexibility to develop a strategy based upon your risk tolerance and the amount of time you have for retirement. You may also be able to work with a financial advisor who can help you decide what strategies to meet your retirement goals. Lastly, rolling over your plan to an IRA may also allow you to consolidate your accounts to one firm to make it easier to manage your assets and determine if you're on track towards meeting your retirement goals. You'll also receive consolidated statements and tax documents to make time and any other time you need to access financial documents much easier. One of the potential trade-offs with an IRA is generally they have higher fees and expenses than an employer plan. IRA's fees can include an annual account fee as well as investment-related expenses, and your plan administrator can help you determine your employer plan. There are also differences as to when you can start taking withdrawals without the 10% early penalty. As we discussed earlier, you can take penalty-free withdrawals from your employer plan beginning at age 55 if you left your employer in the calendar year, if you turned 55 or later, but in an IRA, typically you pay a penalty on withdrawals prior to age 59 and a half. You also have to take RMDs or required minimum distributions from your traditional IRA beginning at age 72. But in your employer's plan, you can delay RMDs until you stop working. Last, assets held in employer plans and those in IRAs may have different levels of protection from creditors under the law. For more information, you should consult with your attorney or tax professional. If you decide to roll to an IRA, it's important to understand two ways you can do, direct or indirectly, and basically it all depends upon who the check is made payable to. Now let's look at this first column. first. With a direct rollover, the check or certificates are made payable to the IRA trustee or custodial for your benefit. The penalties of doing a direct rollover are that you avoid the 20% withholding taxes and penalties. Now let's move over to the column about indirect rollovers. If your distribution check is made payable to you, you can still roll it into a traditional IRA. However, you lose some of the benefits of that direct rollover. First, your employer must withhold 20% of the distributions, and you may owe tax and possibly a 10% penalty if you do not roll the distribution, including the withholding amount, to an IRA within 60 days. If you could receive a lump sum from your retirement plan, how tempting would it be to take the money and pay bills or buy something that you've always wanted? Maybe a boat, maybe a motorcycle, or maybe even a vacation home. Excuse me. Oh. First of all, wanting to check and reach out, we went through a lot of information today. Are there any questions that any of our participants can think of that they have right now?
Well, I have a situation that I'm currently in, which is kind of bizarre, actually. I worked for a hotel chain. I was third in command. I was the senior sales manager for almost 10 years. And I had put money back into the company retirement program, probably a 401k. But back then, I signed up for it, when you're going through your orientation, and it's like check the box if you want to participate or whatever. And a certain amount of my paycheck went in. So I paid very little attention to it over the years, except I would get a statement every so often telling me how much was in the account. And so finally, when I left the company, they gave me a lump sum check. And so I'm thinking, okay, that's everything. They said, you got some vacation pay you didn't take. You've got this, you've got that. Well, I just recently, well, first of all, I have to back up and say I've been gone from there for over 20 years now.
Okay.
And now I'm 65. I just now applied for Medicare, and Medicare sent me a statement and said, we don't have any records on what to do with this, but we show that at one point you had contributed this amount of money into this 401k, and it's still sitting there. And I'm like, what? and they said, but the company is now out of business. So basically, good luck with that. So now I have to sort out, and I haven't had time to really make any phone calls as to, is this program still in effect? Certainly there are some laws where they would have to have tried to contact people before they dissolved the fund. And, and I did move a couple of times, so maybe they did try to contact me. I don't know. So I don't know where that stands. And so this is just something I just learned this week that I now have to basically sort out. And so again, real life happens. And, I'm like, I can't believe I left that amount of money on the table. I thought it was in that lump sum check that I got, right after I left, because I left to start my own business. And so I just assumed, it was kind of a sizable amount of money. And so I'm thinking it must have been in there.
Well, that's a very great point. And I'm really glad that you brought that up, because a lot of times, we move, we think that we have all of our bases covered, and that there's so many different competing forces in life that sometimes things like this often are, overlooked. But I would be honored to be able, if you send me the information that you have, I'd be honored to be able to take a look at it and see if I can help you sort that out. Okay.
Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah, my email address, and this is for any of our listeners or participants, is ANGIE Hill, that's HILL, at edwardjones.com. Well, it's truly been a pleasure to meet with all of you today. It's been outstanding. Anytime that you have any questions, or if you wanted to discuss this further, I'd be happy to meet with you one-on-one. My phone number is 740-654-3829. Actually, let me make sure I had that correctly because, yes, you know how you never call yourself and my office location changed. So, once again, thank you guys for the honor to be able to present here today.
Angie, thank you so much. And again, connect with Angie at angie.hill@edwardjones.com. And Angie, give us your phone number one more time.
Sure, 740-654-3829.
Very good. All right, perfect. Thank you so much. Is there any questions from anyone before we go? I'm just going to take a look at the chat here. Sally Sutter says, thank you, Angie. So Sally, thank you for being with us. Donna, thank you for participating with the webinar today. Angie, thank you so much for coming on and sharing about retirement plans. And yes, this is just something that I have to sort through. So I may be getting in touch with you about this one.
Oh, I would be honored. You know, actually, it can be very confusing when you look at that information, but feel free, just send me a copy of what you had, and I can start the ball rolling and see how we can get you access to those funds.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much. Again, this is Fireside Chat with Debbie Marks. Debbie is out today. I'm Kathy Benner. I'm covering for Debbie, and this is being recorded, and it will be posted in Debbie's replays. So thank you for joining us. Bye.